I want to thank folks at Judson Memorial Church.
I want to thank folks at Judson Memorial Church
For coming out in solidarity at the last minute.
for coming out in solidarity at the last minute
And providing us with this beautiful space.
and providing us with this beautiful space.
Without further ado,
We have with us today
Arundhati Roy.
Arundhati Roy.
Thank you, Arundhati. Mic check.
Mic check.
Thank you, Arundhati,
Thank you, Arundhati,
for your time with us today
for your time with us today
during this very crucial
week
of action.
Week of action.
Lal Salam.
Lan Salam.
Lal Salam. Mic check.
Mic check.
Thank you, Judson Church, and thank you all of you for being here.
Thank you, Judson Church, and thank you all for being here.
Yesterday morning, the police cleared Zuccotti Park, but today
Zuccotti Park.
the people are back.
But today, the people are back.
The police should know that this protest
The police should know that this protest
is not a battle for territory.
is not a battle for territory.
We are not fighting for the right to occupy a park here or there.
We are not fighting for the right to occupy a park here or there.
We are fighting for justice.
We are fighting for justice.
Justice not just for the people of the United States, but for everybody. But for everybody.
But for everybody.
What you have achieved since September 17th,
What you have achieved since September 17th,
when the Occupy movement began in the U.S.,
when the Occupy movement began in the U.S.,
is to introduce a new imagination, a new political language
a new political language
into the heart of empire.
into the heart of empire.
You have reintroduced the right to dream
The right to dream
in a system that tried to turn everybody into zombies,
in a system that tried to turn everybody into zombies.
mesmerized into equating mindless consumerism
Mesmerized into equating mindless consumerism
with happiness and fulfillment.
with happiness and fulfillment.
As a writer, let me tell you,
As a writer, let me tell you,
this is an immense achievement,
this is an immense achievement,
and I cannot thank you enough.
and I cannot thank you enough.
We were talking about justice.
We were talking about justice.
Today, as we speak,
Today, as we speak,
the Army of the United States
the Army of the United States
is waging a war of occupation in Iraq and Afghanistan.
is waging a war of occupation in Iraq and Afghanistan.
U.S. drones are killing civilians in Pakistan and beyond.
U.S. drones are killing civilians in Pakistan and beyond.
Tens of thousands of U.S. troops and death squads
Tens of thousands of U.S. troops and death squads
are moving into Africa.
are moving into Africa.
If spending trillions of dollars of your money
If spending trillions of dollars of your money
to administer occupations in Iraq and Afghanistan
to administer occupations in Iraq and Afghanistan
is not enough,
is not enough,
a war against Iran is being talked up.
a war against Iran is being talked up.
Ever since the Great Depression,
Ever since the Great Depression,
the manufacture of weapons
the manufacture of weapons
and the export of war
and the export of war
have been key ways in which the United States
have been key ways in which the United States
has stimulated its economy.
has stimulated its economy.
Just recently, under President Obama, the U.S. made a $60 billion arms deal with Saudi Arabia.
A $60 billion arms deal with Saudi Arabia.
Moderate Muslims, right?
Moderate Muslims, right?
It hopes to sell thousands of bunker busters to the UAE.
It hopes to sell thousands of bunker busters to the UAE.
It has sold $5 billion worth of military aircraft to my country.
It has sold $5 billion worth of military aircraft to my country.
India.
Which
has more poor people than all the poorest countries of Africa put together.
Which has more poor people than all the poorest countries of Africa put together.
All these wars, from the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki,
to
Vietnam, Korea, and Latin America, have claimed millions of lives. All of them fought to secure the American way of life. Today we know that the American way of life, the model that the rest of the world is meant to aspire towards, has resulted in 400 people owning the wealth of half of the population of the United States. It has meant thousands of people being turned out of their homes.
It has meant thousands of people being turned out of their homes
and their jobs,
while the U.S. government
bailed out banks and corporations. American International Group, AIG, alone was given $182 billion. The Indian government worships U.S. economic policy. As a result of 20 years of the free market economy, today 100 of India's richest people own assets worth 1/4 of the country's GDP. While more than 80% of the people live on less than 50 cents a day. 250,000 farmers driven into a spiral of debt have committed suicide. We call this progress. And now think of ourselves as a superpower. Like you, we are well qualified. We have nuclear bombs. And obscene inequality. The good news is that people have had enough. And are not going to take it anymore. The Occupy movement has joined thousands of other resistance movements all over the world, in which the poorest of people are standing up and stopping the richest corporations in their tracks. Few of us dream that we would see
that we would see you,
the people of the United States,
the people of the United States,
on our side,
on our side,
trying to do this
trying to do this
in the heart of empire.
in the heart of empire.
I don't know how to communicate
I don't know how to communicate
the enormity of what this means.
the enormity of what this means.
They, the 1%,
They, the 1%,
say that we don't have demands.
say that we don't have demands.
Perhaps they don't know
Perhaps they don't know
that our anger alone
that our anger alone
would be enough to destroy them.
would be enough to destroy them.
But here are some things,
But here are some things,
a few pre-revolutionary thoughts I had
a few pre-revolutionary thoughts I had
for us to think about together.
for us to think about together.
We want to put a lid on this system that manufactures inequality.
We want to put a lid on the system that manufactures inequality.
We want to put a cap on the unfettered accumulation of wealth and property.
We want to put a cap on the unfettered accumulation of wealth and property
By individuals as well as corporations.
by individuals as well as corporations.
As capists and Luddites,
As capists and Luddites,
we demand one,
one,
an end to cross-ownership in businesses.
an end to cross-ownership in businesses.
For example,
For example,
weapons manufacturers cannot own TV stations.
weapons manufacturers cannot own TV stations.
Mining corporations cannot run newspapers.
Mining corporations cannot run newspapers.
Business houses cannot fund universities.
Business houses cannot fund universities.
Drug companies cannot control public health funds.
Drug companies cannot control public health funds. Two,
Natural resources and essential infrastructure.
natural resources and essential infrastructure.
Water supply, electricity, health and education
Water supply, electricity, health, and education
cannot be privatized.
cannot be privatized.
3.
Three,
Everybody must have the right to shelter, education and health care.
everybody must have the right to healthcare and education.
4. The children of the rich cannot inherit their parents' wealth.
The children of the rich cannot inherit their parents' wealth.
This struggle has reawakened our imagination.
This struggle has reawakened our imagination.
Somewhere along the way,
Somewhere along the way,
capitalism reduced the idea of justice to mean just human rights.
capitalism reduced the idea of justice to mean just human rights.
And the idea of dreaming of equality
And the idea of dreaming of equality
became blasphemous.
became blasphemous.
We are not fighting
We are not fighting
to just tinker
to just tinker
with reforming
with reforming
a system that needs to be replaced.
a system that needs to be replaced.
As a capist,
As a capist and a Luddite,
I salute your struggle.
I salute your struggle.
Salam and Zindabad.
Salam and Zindabad.
We now have a brief time for questions. If you have something you would like to ask Arundhati, please raise your hand.
There's a rumor that you're writing a new novel. Is that true?
Let me listen to it. Anyone else? Yes.
When violence and when non-violence?
The question was when
Yes.
See, because often, especially now in India, when there are armed struggles and guardian struggles, when you phrase something by saying violence and non-violence, it becomes a way of derailing the argument. So what we're talking about is non-violent resistance and armed resistance. Because violence and non-violence can be, wife-beating. Now, I recently spent a long time in the forests of central India with armed guerrillas who are fighting to keep the corporations off the lands of indigenous people. To put it simply, I would say that non-violence is a resistance strategy which is extremely effective when it has an audience, when it has an audience that is sympathetic. And for example, here in America, you have an audience. Because you live on television. It's important to understand that. Whereas deep inside the forests of India, when 1,000 paramilitary policemen go and burn down a village and rape the women and chase the people off, they don't have an audience. They're too hungry to be on a hunger strike. So to me, the use of arms or non-violence is not always an ideological thing. It's a tactical thing. And people have to understand and study very carefully what tactics they will employ in order not to be crushed, in order for a resistance to be successful. It's not ideological, and it's important not to be immature or childish about the choices that are made.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I'm very contemplating, and I believe to be a part of the massive movement. And I am also occupying 477 and been involved with you as the young people, as an elder, since day 2, occupying Wall Street. The question I ask you, how do the young people occupying Wall Street move into a system, a systemic system, that can be a best practice around the world of young people that are uprising and for change? How do we do that?
Can you repeat it, the question?
The question was, how do young people occupy Wall Street, which I'm assuming you mean is an abstraction. It's a systemic change that is required. How do young people across the world join in creating this kind of a systemic change?
Right, as a best practice.
As a best practice. In the world.
See, I think that for many years, the media in America has conspired to keep the people of the United States ignorant about what's going on in the rest of the world. There have been huge struggles, and there are enormous struggles going on across the world. I come from India, and I can tell you that the whole place is in ferment. And for us, this is already a practice. For us, it's already the fact when 200,000 people gather in a village in India to protest a mining corporation, it's not even reported in the local papers. But when 1,000 US citizens gather on Wall Street, it's almost a revolution. and that's important. It's important for us. I'm not trying to minimize it. I'm saying, this exchange of solidarities is already practiced. And I think that the movement here has to find ways of reaching out into other communities within the United States who perhaps are almost too marginalized to even join the occupation. There must be, I don't live here, and I haven't traveled a lot in the United States, but when I do, sometimes I ask my friends, is there apartheid here? Where are the black folks? They're not around, you don't see them in restaurants or at meetings and so on. But all these solidarities have to be made, because that's how it will come, the practice will come. In India today, the poorest people in the world have stopped the richest mining corporations in their tracks because they're just putting their bodies on the line. In the US, I would love to see a movement that stopped the transport of weapons, that actually locked out the weapons manufacturers, that did not allow the missiles to be moved onto ships to make war against other people to stimulate the economy here.
Yes, ma'am. The question is, what are your thoughts on the Anna Hazare movement in India these days?
I don't know whether how many people know about it, but it's a movement that captured the imagination of the Indian media, especially the corporate media and the Indian middle class, a movement against corruption. I guess the closest equivalent would be the Tea Party movement here. But essentially they are talking about making an unfair system work more smoothly and be less corrupt. So while it's easy for people to take a sort of global view of these people's uprisings in India and in the Middle East and in America and in the United States, you actually have to look at these things quite separately. And while that uprising was happening in India, there was not one single slogan against a single corporation. It was in fact sponsored, and by sponsored I mean supported hugely, 24 hours a day for weeks together by the corporate media. It was a movement very heavily supported by the right wing. And of course there were a lot of poor people who joined, hoping that somehow it would reduce prices or bring them some kind of justice, because that was the hype. But all that fell away actually. So to put it, unsubtly, I found it rather repulsive.
Okay, I think we have time for just 2 more questions. Yes.
How is it possible for the Occupy movement to clear out this pipeline between us and the people, the comrades in the forest? How is it possible to show solidarity? And what would we gain by doing that?
Well, I don't think you need to clear out the pipeline. I think that there was a time when I was among the people who thought that things like the World Social Forum that were happening, this effort to have real sort of logistical solidarity was very important. And then I found that all the best activists were just turning into travel agents, booking people's tickets from Porto Alegre to Bombay and, organizing these meetings. The whole thing was becoming NGO-ized. I think it's important for everybody to fight their own battles with the same imagination that people are fighting within other places. But it's important for you to dismantle things here and allow people to fight their battles there while you understand each other. But I think one of the main things I would like to say is that people need to expose the connections between corporations, media, NGOs, all of this. For example, in India there's an iron ore mining company which is displacing thousands of indigenous people with its steel plants and its mines. The CEO of that company is a member of parliament. He's also the chairman of the National Flag Foundation because he won the right to fly the national flag on his house. They also have a global law school where they teach, environmental law and all the biggest sort of international lawyers come there as faculty. They're now going to start a global school of public policy. They also support a lot of cutting-edge artists working in stainless steel. They recently held a protest workshop where all the activists and poets and radical people came to recite their poetry and talk about protest. So you see, these people, these corporations generate so much money that they can be the governor in the government, they can have the flag, they can have the media, they can be the resistance and the oppressors, they can be everybody, you know. It's like a Hindu mythological in which you can call the gods and the demons and everybody can be everybody. So these are the links that need to be broken. So that the media, for example, it's not that journalists are bad people or editors are evil, but just the way it's structured. Everything comes from corporate advertising. So how can you expect it to function otherwise? It's structurally built to perpetuate a system that is creating the problem. And can the imagination that created the problem solve it? I don't think so.